private investigators of Reddit. What is the most bizarre task you've been assigned to? A couple was divorcing and the wife was sure her husband was sticking random items of hers up his ass. He was. So many questions. Did surveillance on a nurse. She was supposedly so disabled that she couldn't work. They suspected she was working. Easiest surveillance I ever did. I arrived. She got in her car 10 minutes later. Followed her, with no complication, to a strip club where she went in and began doing her thing. Club had a posted prohibition on video, so I had to go in and watch her dance so that I could testify that I saw her dancing when it went to court. Over the next few days I followed her to 3 other strip clubs and did the same. That month I turned in the sketchiest expense report of my life. Eventually it went before the WC board. When the judge asked why she was stripping, she just shrugged and said she made twice as much money than when she was nursing. Benefits got yanked. Insurance company was happy, but the company lawyer gave me the nickname Detective T, which, most regrettably, stuck and spread to all of the other lawyers I dealt with. Worst night of my life, man. Was hired to follow a woman who claimed she was completely blind, collecting insurance money of course. Spent the day following her around as she drove from store to store in a church van. Jesus, take the wheel. Someone wanted to know what their cat was up to when they were working. Paid me to tell it. I don't like wasting my time, but the work's not always busy as a pie. Turns out the cat just walks around the streets, licks itself and climbs trees. I know it's not the case, but I can't help imagine you carefully stalking along tree branches and the tops of fences, and videoing the cat sleeping in a sunbeam for 10 hours at a clip. Not a pie here, but someone who was confronted by one and told it was the weirdest thing he's had to do. A roommate I had in college was a strange guy. This guy came from the other side of the country. I'm US. He went out at all hours of the night, never showed up for class, slept during the day, and drank more energy drinks than is healthy. His parents were worried about him, apparently, and hired a pie to trail him. Now, living in a college dorm in a part of campus where only freshmen live makes an adult who isn't janitorial staff stick out like a sore thumb. So, I picked up fairly quickly that this guy was hanging around the dorms. Thought he was just cruising for some freshmen, and didn't bother him. A few weeks later, I was walking back from the dining hall, and he approached me. It was a public place, asking if we could talk somewhere private. I was weirded out and told him we could talk right here. He told me he was a pie hired by my roommate's parents to trail him because his parents were concerned, and he wanted to ask me about my roommate's dorm habits. We then left to the coffee shop to talk about my roommate. My roommate apparently liked to go walk on the beach at night for stupid amounts of time, hang out at Steak and Shake playing game on his phone and Nintendo DS for hours on end, and cruise thrift shops for some reason. I told the guy that the dude just slept and didn't even have any personal effects in the room besides his clothes. The pie and I both realized that this kid pretty much had no direction or motivation in life, and his parents usually pushed him to do everything. He said that this kid's behavior was the most bizarre pattern of activity he's pretty much seen. To explain the kid's actions, college was the first alone time he's ever had, and he was savoring at doing whatever he wanted. I ended up feeling for the guy and reached out to him. He changed majors from engineering to a psychology degree because he wanted to learn how the mind worked, and he suddenly became super interested in college. Ended up being a cool guy once he realized he was not in his parents' grasp anymore. This made me kinda sad because his behavior patterns kinda sound like mine. I've only been away from home for 2 months. I'll just take off to the mountains or drive around all night or shop all day just because I can. Parents who always want control over what their kid is doing can frick the kid right up. I'm a pie, among other things. I haven't had any bizarre tasks, though I have had some interesting situations, and I've performed surveillance on cheating spouses as well as factual workers' compensation and public liability matters. One matter which really made an impression on me was where a person had a fatal vehicle incident and a claim was made that it was a workplace injury. I don't know what on earth happened with this claim, but it was 5 years before the insurer gave it to me. There were some questions about it. The person making the claim alleged to be the worker's wife, though work colleagues did not know her. and also the incident was almost 200 kilometers from the workplace. When I spoke to former colleagues, a lot of them struggled to remember him. This really was so sad. It left a deep impression on me that what are we once we are dead if we are not even memories. I did, however, learn he stayed at a caravan park during the working week. I called that place, but the owner said it had changed hands and he didn't know the guy. He didn't have any old records, and he didn't know where the former owner was. He did remember the former owner's name, however. I called everyone in the phone book for the state with that name. I finally got my man, and he remembered the deceased vividly, along with his wife and son. It was tremendous. I learned the guy would stay near the workplace during the week and travel back home to a remote town for weekends. I drove all the way to that town but couldn't find the wife. She wasn't at any address I had, nor did she answer her phone. I got petrol and asked at the counter if they knew the family, and they said it might be so and so and directed me to a house. I went there. Turned out to be the wife's parents. They called the daughter. She arrived and both mother and daughter had a big cry while showing me all their photographs of the guy. It was very moving, and I was so relieved to have real evidence the guy ever actually existed after how his co-workers were finding it hard to remember him. The story was very sad. He died on the way to work on a Monday morning. Normally he would travel to the caravan on a Friday night, but this particular weekend was Mother's Day. He stayed Sunday night and traveled Monday, early in the morning, ran off the road and passed away. I was able to determine the lady was genuinely his wife, that he was on his way to the workplace, that it was his regular route to work, and so on. I supplied this to the insurer. I never, well, rarely ever, hear what happens to a matter, so I only hope it was finally settled. Finally, a question I can answer. Been a PI for going on a year now, and the strangest case I had was of a woman asking us to find out if her husband was cheating on her. She said there was something off in the house, as if feeling something, and she wanted to know what it was. So she suspected her husband of cheating. So I show up and install nanny cams in her house for the weekend upon her approval and where to place them. She works all weekend and this was the best route. Well, 3 days go by and I collect the footage and come to find out the husband was touching his 8-year-old stepdaughter. After seeing that, I rushed to the courthouse with a copy of the footage and got a court order for the police to go and get him. Frick dude, the mother must have been horrified. Any pies ever get hired to investigate a husband because the wife was suspicious of all the times he had to work late only to find out he really was working late? Yes, constantly. Alright, here goes. After I got out of the Navy, I worked for one of the top pie firms in Houston. Because of my electronics background, I'd usually go along on the jobs where we were checking for bugs and hidden surveillance devices. We got a call from a client who was sure that his office was bugged because his client knew everything that he was doing before he did it. His office was a mobile trailer that was on his client's site. He was a subcontractor for a big oilfield construction company. We did a full electronic sweep and found nothing. This was back in the early 90s. Didn't have to worry about burst transmissions, etc. No devices implanted in his phones. He insisted on a full physical sweep of the trailer, inside and out. So we crawled under the trailer and got a ladder and inspected the roof. Still nothing. We're getting ready to leave and he says, "Look, I'm not crazy. Pick up the phone, press 9 to get an outside line, and you'll start hearing all sorts of clicky sounds." Turns out his office phones were routed through the corporate PBX of his client. They didn't have to bug his office. They could just pick up an extension inside the main building and listen into whatever they wanted. We weren't even sure if it was illegal. We advised him to install a private phone line that he paid for if he wanted private conversations. We ended up billing him like $2,000 for that visit. Hey man, you're kinda adult. BTW $2,000 please. I had a case referred to me by an attorney I worked for involving a woman who was convinced that her condo maintenance man was going into her home while she was gone and moving things around. She had bought the condo from him originally. In other words, it was his former condo. I met her to discuss the case and she seemed rational. She was an attractive older woman. The guy would obviously be familiar with the condo layout and would have access. And heck, I've seen weirder things. So we proceeded. She agreed to let me install a hidden camera setup with a motion detector. She was to call me if anything happened to make her think he'd been there. A couple of days go by and she calls. I go by and get the tape. This was before digital recording. and check it out. There's nothing on it but her. I meet her to tell her this and she says, he must have some machine that makes him invisible. He's a space alien. After all, she had not previously mentioned this vital tidbit of information. I told her that that level of technology was beyond my ability to deal with and that we should talk it over with her attorney to determine the best course of action going forward. I called the attorney to let him know that our client had some issues, and we were able to get her some psychological help. But most importantly, her check was good. Meanwhile, a malicious alien is out there somewhere breaking into condos because you let him go free. I have a story about this. My brother was a PI in the early 90s. He worked for a law firm. I was in my early 20s and so he got me a gig as a process server. He was working a particularly nasty divorce case. Husband was a Jordanian national married to an American woman, one of several wives, who was over being the broodmare in the family and wanted out. Also, she worked for NASA. He was tasked with going into their house, which was in her name. She wasn't living there. She was in an apartment until this was settled, and getting a briefcase with financial information in it. Since I was a process server, I had to go along in case someone was home for whatever reason. We went and waited down the road until everyone left and went in and got the briefcase. No big deal. We take it back to the attorney's office and he calls the lady and says he has it. She gives him the combination, he opens it and it was full of technical plans from Boeing for the Apache helicopter. Attorney says frick, instantly shuts the briefcase, tells me and my brother to leave now, so we did. We never heard any more about that case at all, other than he contacted the FBI over it. I have a question. How likely is it that a PI will lie about who he works for to protect a client? My sister was worried she was being followed. She is adopting a baby and the baby has an adult sister who wants her, but has failed CPS basic standards. She is being investigated because she broke into my sister's medical records. She worked in the doctor's office my family goes to. Basically, she is at the point she has been so nasty she is losing her supervised visits too because the lawyers and CPS believe she is trying to take the baby and run. A private eye fell down and broke his leg in her backyard. She lives in a condo complex. He claims he wasn't gathering intel on her, but won't say who he is actually working for. He knows it would be enough to file for a retraining order. We think it is too much of a coincidence and is lying. I wonder how likely it is he is lying. Doing a standard pre-employment background check on a guy, found that he was found guilty in a sexual harassment case. Didn't have the case details at that point and the guy denied it was him. Pulled more details from the case and confirmed that it was definitely him, and that he was convicted of indecent exposure. The guy finally admitted it was him, but claimed it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Pulled the court transcripts. Turns out he flashed a 12-year-old on the beach and said ever seen one of these before he did not get the job. I worked for a pie company that mostly handled workers' compensation cases for insurance companies or other employers. Assigned to a case in Seattle where a guy was claiming an upper back and shoulder injury. After a few hours on site at his house, he pulls up in a truck, proceeds to empty the truck bed of landscaping equipment alone. After he has put everything away, he walks over to the side of his neighbor's house, pulls out a piece of the siding of the building, withdraws a crack pipe and smokes it in front of me, all on camera. Another case in Texas, I was following a guy, back injury, to the mall where he met up with a woman that was not his wife. I had already identified her the previous day, and followed them as they shopped around and then back to his vehicle where they proceeded to have sex in the car in the middle of the mall parking lot. I filmed it of course, but I had to call my boss to make sure that I could send this to the client. She was kinda hot too, so. In the middle of the mall parking lot. Where else would they do it, you savage? I was asked to help my boss fire another investigator due to his short temper. I was told to arrive at 7:30 because he likes to arrive at 8 o'clock. So like any other day I woke up and started to drive to work through a freaking blizzard and didn't end up getting there till 7:40. Go to my boss and says he already fired the guy. What the frick, man, what if he lashed out and whatnot and I wasn't there? His reply was he didn't, but he wanted me to stick around just in case. So I sat there for 4 hours drinking coffee on double time, which was great until I had to file a 2-page report on me drinking coffee. My sophomore year of college was a part-time pie and bragged about it to the co-ed underclassmen. Few weeks before spring break he's seen with bruising and black eyes. Some guy he had been following to catch in an affair got a hold of him and beat him senseless. Seems like a prime case to charge for assault. A colleague of mine was a pie. He said the majority of his casework isn't tailing people but serving court notices. He told me of a variety of really slimy ways he'd serve people, including disguises, high pressure tactics and weird social engineering. He's out of it now because he'd had too many close calls, serving divorce papers or notices of being sued where you have no idea of the state of mind of the person you're serving to. Could get interesting to say the least. I once served a county sheriff, district attorney, district judge, and a sitting federal judge for the same case. The case was that they threw a different pie in jail on contempt charges and wouldn't let him out or give him a hearing. Good times. I did surveillance for insurance fraud workers' comp cases for a short time. We would usually just be assigned to someone for a couple of days, unless we found something that warranted more time. On my first day watching this guy, he leaves his house about 7 hours into the 8-hour for me day. I follow him out of the neighborhood, out of the town, onto the highway, still on the highway, into the metro area, into downtown. Oh crap, where is this guy going to? And into a valet parking ramp. I panicked a bit because I had my video camera, laptop, and all the background paperwork sitting on the passenger seat next to me. I was able to shovel that stuff away or grab it into a pocket before I turned the car over to the valet. Ended up riding the elevator out of the garage with the guy and his family. They were going to see the seasonal holiday light parade thing, so that was nice to watch at least. The fact I could sell my $700 crap car for $2,000 here, paying $20 shipping for a $10 trillion shirt from Seattle, going to Canada for a quick drink at 19, and the insanity that is living and going to school somewhere 3 towns over. Source: live born in Alaska, went to middle high school down south. I got hired to follow another investigator who, turns out, was hired to follow me. Someone had some money to burn. How do you even become a private investigator? The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite, holds aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water, signifying by divine providence that you are to be a private investigator. Okay, not a pie, but my boss hired one. He never told me, but I was snooping around the network one day and came across a document that was cut and paste emails between the boss and a pie. I worked for a playground design construction company, very small, and the boss was an absolute prick. He may have been bipolar because he would be happy one minute and then the tiniest problem, like a slide being a different color to what he thought it should be, would send him off the rails for the rest of the day. Anyway, according to this document, he was suspicious that his competitor was able to offer playgrounds cheaper than him and still make money. He had a strong suspicion that the competitor was using illegal immigrants to build the playgrounds and paying them in cash, for less than the minimum wage. This is in Australia, not the US. So this is probably very uncommon here. The pie went to a construction site and talked to the workers. He returned a report that stated that the workers were cooperative. They did not appear to be foreign. They spoke English very well. They even showed him their driver's licenses. He left totally satisfied that the workers were legitimate Australian citizens. Boss refused to pay. The rest of the document was the pie arguing that he did work and should be paid for it. A few $1,000s I think. While butthole boss argument was that the workers were definitely illegal immigrants. He just knew it. And if the pie couldn't prove it, then he wasn't a very good pie and therefore shouldn't be paid. I was asked by a lady to investigate her husband because he might be cheating on her. He used to come back late at night with smell of woman's perfume. Turns out he was taking dancing classes and he didn't tell his wife. Clients wanted to know why her dog was getting fat. Turns out the dog was getting fed by almost every stranger it encountered while wandering around outside during the day. Second, I found a lady who'd been missing for 20 years out of pure dumb luck. I was getting lunch another town over and she walked out of a resale shop across the street. It was so unexpected that the only footage I could get on her was with my crappy phone camera. Otherwise, I don't get a ton of bizarre cases. Most of the time, I'm just doing insurance fraud cases since that's where the money is. The most interesting part is looking at their background info and piecing together what kind of person they are based on their spending habits. Then you take that information, make a quick and dirty psychological profile, and try to predict their movements based on it. I've gotten pretty good at it. A private investigator came into the bar I was bartending at years ago and showed me 2 pictures. One of a girl in her early 20s that her family was trying to find. The other of a guy in his late 20s that they suspected she had run away with. The guy in the picture had a charge on his debit card from my bar a week earlier, so the investigator came in hoping that I would remember if the girl was with him that night. I did not recognize the girl at all, but I remembered the guy. He had come in with 2 other guys around his age. They got pretty drunk, but all they really did was shoot pool. They didn't cause any problems and they actually tipped me really well. I never heard anything else about the girl, so I don't know if the family eventually found her or if she disappeared for good. I just now remembered that her first name was Katie. I can't remember the guy's name though. Is anybody else reading all these stories in a 1920s voice? I am now. This is the goodest flyboy. He will bring you 10 years of happiness in exchange for a like on this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.